You're listening to episode 5 of Speakin with Deacon, Answering God's Call. Speakin with Deacon is a production of the Parousia Podcast Network in partnership with Voice of Charity Australia and EWTN Asia Pacific. Join us as we discuss strategies that will empower us to announce the gospel of the Lord daily through our words and deeds. This is Speakin with Deacon. Hello and thanks for joining us again on Speakin with Deacon. My name is Mark Griffin, your host, and joining me as always is Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Deacon, how are you?
I'm doing well, Mark. It's great to be with you as always.
It's great to have you back, and it's great that you're able to fit this in, obviously with the world opening up and catching up and making up for lost time. You're pretty busy traveling everywhere at the moment, aren't you?
Yes, I'm traveling literally every week, and sometimes I'm even weeks away from home, 2 weeks, maybe even a little bit longer before I can come home. And I'm usually home only a day or a day and a half and then back out again. It's the result of the rescheduling events from 2020 and early 2021 due to COVID. And so I got to say, it's been good to be back out again. I just wish it was a little bit slower pace, but I mean, it'll die down. It's just for the next few months. And then, in fact, my schedule is not going to be as busy in the fall because when people were canceling, there were also no new engagements being booked. And so it kind of left this kind of a gap in my schedule moving forward, because usually I'm booked 2 years in advance, but that's not the case now. So, and I'm going to be doing some things to kind of back off my parish mission schedule. Mm-hmm. I want to focus on conferences and like shorter length events, so I can spend more time at home and focus more on pilgrimages and traveling to overseas, to Australia and New Zealand. Hopefully,
can't wait to have you back.
Yeah. I'm really looking for it. I got several new talks that I've developed that I've been giving them over the past couple months, and they've been going very, very well received. So I'm excited to share those with the people down under.
Oh, that's great to hear. We look forward to having you back and hearing some of that new material. No doubt it's going to be as informative as everything you've presented before. So yeah, looking forward to that opportunity when it comes again. And thank you for making time in the busy schedule to sit down with us today and go through this topic. And the topic today, we're going to be talking a little bit about discernment and finding our vocation and answering God's call. Now, in our previous episode, we talked a lot about praying and praying with confidence. And I suppose this then flows on from that is, once we're in that conversation with God, what are we going to do with it, and how do we find God's will in our life? So for today's discussion, we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to use your own vocational testimony as a bit of a roadmap, as a bit of a case study, if you like, to how we can discern God's will in our life and find our vocation and then what to do next. So maybe to start with, Deacon, why don't you give us a little bit about your background? As a child, was your faith a big part of your life, and what sort of family life and community life did you have that contributed to your faith life, and where did you sit at that stage in your life?
Yeah, so I was born in Barbados, in the West Indies, in the Caribbean. Barbados is in a chain of islands called the Lesser Antilles. So it's the island that's the largest and the furthest east in that chain. And it's not too far off the coast of Venezuela, and also very close to Trinidad and Tobago. And we're first generation to come to the United States. My father was a very popular singer and nightclub owner, and my mom was a cardiac care nurse. Right. And my mom was the first Catholic in our family. So she was a Methodist, and she became Catholic when she was a teenager. And then my father was not a person of faith at all. He didn't come to faith till much, much later in his life. And so, I was baptized 3 weeks after I was born. So really, I'm the first baptized Catholic in our family, because, of course, my mother didn't have to be baptized when she came into the church, just Eucharist and confirmation. So my mom when we immigrated to the United States, my mom was very strong Catholic. So we went to mass, every week. We went, she said she sacrificed, worked lots of overtime, many, many hours to send us to Catholic school. And I remember even as young as 9 years old, 10 years old, really enjoying going to church. And I remember I used to be focused on what was going on at the altar to the point where my mom would seat me in the pew next to the aisle, and then she would stand next to me, and then my siblings, my two brothers and my sister, would be on the other side of my mom because they were typical kids, like throwing Cheerios and bumping each other during mass. But I remember this. I remember looking at the altar and seeing everything going on up there and saying to myself, there, wow, there's something really cool going on up there. I don't really understand exactly what it is, but I like it, and
Yeah.
and when I got to serve mass, oh my goodness, I thought I was in heaven. I I mean, even to this day, Mark, I'm in my 50s and I've been ordained as a deacon for 19 years. And I still, when I'm standing in the back of the church ready to process to the front, I still get that childlike kind of excitement, of being able to serve at the altar, just like I did when I was 9 and 10.
You said it was like being in heaven. In one way, it kind of is, though, in reality
Yeah,
as well. There is that spiritual reality about it. So that's not a bad description of how it would feel. You mentioned that your mother was the faith influence at this point, and your dad wasn't a man of faith. A lot of surveys, I've seen results, and I don't have any to draw on now, but just picking up on what you said, you've seen results from surveys that suggest that the father is the one who the children will follow, and the mother is fighting against that, which is why it's so important for Christian fathers to be strong and men of faith to lead their children. Because of the dynamic that you had with your mother as the leader, of the faith leader, if you like, in the family, did you ever have a pull in the direction of, oh, this faith, this is old fashioned, this isn't for me, in the direction of your father who wasn't a man of faith? Did you ever have that pull or feel that conflict there?
No. Again, which is kind of unusual.
Yeah.
You don't have many kids that at that age saying, wow, I really like going to church, or I really want to be on the altar again this week. you know um and I remember it's just this one of the things that I think parents need to be aware of, because every child is different, right? I have 4 kids, you have 7, with another one on the way. And so every child is different. And I think what parents have to do is recognize the personality of the child,
Hmm.
and recognize that, and really pay attention to if that child, what their talents, what their personality, is geared toward, in order to help them properly discern. And when it comes to the faith piece, you're right. When the kids are little, it's all about mommy, right? When the kids are little, they're clinging to mommy because mommy's the one that's feeding them, and all that kind of stuff. And dad's important too, of course, but dad's role really kicks in when the kids are older. When they're trying now to navigate friendships, when they're trying to understand their relationship with God, when they're trying to own their relationship with God. It's not just when my parents are telling me I have to go to church, my parents telling me I have to believe this stuff. They get to an age where they begin to own it, and it's the same age where they begin that natural breaking away from the parents and that kind of independence, which is necessary for adulthood, but that natural progression. And so parents really need to pay attention to that. And that's where the father's role really kicks in. And you're right, Mark. In my first book, Behold the Man, I talk about that study where it shows that if women just bring the children to church, like only 30% or less of them stay in the Catholic faith. But if the fathers are involved, bringing them to church and praying with them, being part of their life, 70% will stay in the church. So the fathers, well, why? Because he's the priest of the family,
Sure.
right? And the main job of a priest is to offer sacrifice. Now, my situation, and like many people's situation, my parents were divorced. My father was not a man of faith. He was not an important faith person in my life at all. never saw my father in church growing up ever. So what my mother did, she understood she could be the best mother that she could be, but she could not be a father figure to us. And
Mhm.
so she made sure we had other male role models, not to take the place of my father, but to be a witness and a sign of what authentic manhood looked like, to help me navigate those sometimes turbulent and difficult teenage years. So for me, it was my scoutmaster, who was actually a Jewish doctor, who came from the suburbs into the city to be with us, the Boy Scouts, on Monday nights. And he was very influential, very informative. And in fact, I kept a friendship with him even through college, and when he was no longer in scouting, I kept in regular touch with him. My wrestling coach, I was an athlete in high school, a standout athlete actually, and my wrestling coach was very influential, very much a father figure. Some of my teachers, the monks at the monastery, were all very, very influential, all men, influential in a lot of different ways, predominantly um, believing in me during those times when I didn't even believe in myself. They played a crucial role. In fact, in the acknowledgments in my first book, I actually named them, to thank them personally for everything that they did for me.
That's great. Did you ever feel the desire to share with your father the faith that you had and that your mother had and that she was bringing your family up in, or was he just very distant from it and just closed off to it? And how did that dynamic go? Did you ever wish he was there with you?
No, no, he was very distant, like as you say, Mark, very closed off, not interested
Hmm.
really at all in anything with the faith. When I started expressing an interest in the priesthood, he treated it like a phase, because he knew my mom was very religious, right?
Hmm.
And so obviously that, he expected some of that to rub off on us kids. Um, and when I expressed an interest in the priesthood, he goes, "Yeah, he didn't really take it seriously." Even when I was in high school and I began the Come and See program with the Benedictines,
Hmm.
who ran my high school. By the time I was a senior, Mark, I was living 2 weeks in the monastery every other month. So I was spending a lot of time in the monastery, a lot of time living and praying with the monks as a high school student,
Sure,
and I felt a very strong attraction to monastic life, to the
sure.
point where I even majored. I had talks with the abbot about, what am I going to study in college at uni. So when if I did join the monastery, how could they use my talents and my skills? And so that's one of the reasons why I was an economics and business major and the business emphasis was on accounting, because they were thinking I would be the business manager in the monastery.
Right.
I also took Latin at uni because going to be a monk, you have to chant, you have to use Latin. So I
Yes.
figured I need Latin. So all of that influenced, the decisions I made after high school.
Did you, we'll touch on a bit on the time in the monastery then. Did you ever at that point feel that you were there as a call to the priesthood, or were you there just to be a religious in the community? Or what did you feel at that point in time you were being led to? And what were the things that were sort of going back and forth in your mind as to the indicators? Because obviously we're theming this around vocation and journey of discernment. Your time in the monastery, obviously you didn't stay there. So while you were there, what were the things going around in your mind and what was your focus?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Um, when I was in university, I never lost the desire. I mean, I dated, in college, never really considered marriage. So even though I was dating, I knew I would go to the monastery. It was more like, there weren't really any serious relationships or anything like that. It's just, going to a dance and things like that. Um, and after uni, I worked for a year because I wanted to have that experience of owning a car and having a job and paying bills and paying rent and an apartment, and all those things that you do. So I did that for a year and I had a spiritual director who I was still, speaking with at the university. And then after that year, I joined monastic life, and um, I was very happy. I mean, I really enjoyed the silence. That's what attracted me. It was, the silence, the prayer, the rhythm of the day, not have to worry about what to wear. Because right now, Mark, I just got back from a trip. I was gone for a week and a half, and what suit, what tie, what shirt, what shoes. I mean, it's just in a monastery, get up, throw a habit on, done.
Yes.
You don't have to think about that.
Yeah.
And so that fit me. I mean, I felt very comfortable there. And as far as the priesthood, I still believed I had a call to the priesthood, which you can do, of course, as a monk. You could be a monk and a priest, but the priest was basically the abbot's decision. The
Okay.
abbot is the one who decides whether you go on to the priesthood. But of course, I was slated to go on to the priesthood there at the abbey. And so it was one of those things where I did pray and did discern as a teenager, and then as a young adult, and everything in my body, in my soul, told me that this was what God wanted me to do, to be a monk. And that caused a tremendous rift with my dad, to the point where when I made the decision to join the monastery and I went to talk to him about it, we got into a pretty heated argument, and I basically considered him dead to me at that point. And we didn't speak for another 18 years
Wow.
after that. Yeah.
So this vocation business is a serious business. This can really change your life, can't it?
Well, you know what? It's the same thing happens, Mark. I compare it to those who are not Catholic, who make the decision to come into the church, and it may cost them a relationship with their parents. It may cost them very good friends. And if they're a pastor in a Protestant parish, it may cost them, it's going to cost them their job and their livelihood. And what does Jesus say, though? The truth is what divides, right? He says, the truth is like a two-edged sword. And that's why Jesus taught you think I came to bring peace? I came to bring the sword. And this is what mother against daughter, father against son, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, because he's talking, it's the truth that divides.
Yeah.
And so, but you have to follow the truth wherever the truth leads. And so I was willing to sacrifice that relationship with my dad, being an adult now, and they were already divorced. He was already kind of out of my life anyway, and it was, I mean, I didn't like the fact that was the case, but, I knew I had to follow Jesus.
Sure.
And my mom was very supportive. My friends, when I was in high school, they made fun of me because they knew I was living in the monastery, but I don't care. I don't, it was an all boys school. You know how guys rib each other,
Yeah.
right? So I could care less. But when I did join, they were very supportive, including my best friend at the time, who ended up being the best man in my wedding. But he didn't understand, but he was very supportive, and that meant a lot to me.
What do you think is the role of our family and friends in our life, and when we're discerning our vocation, when we're discerning our path, and sometimes as we're finding out, you really discover who your friends are and who your supportive family are. Can you speak a bit to the power of the role that your support network plays when you're on this journey, and how important it is if you know someone who might be discerning for the priesthood or religious life, or even a discernment for marriage, how important it is to be supportive, but not patronizing to what they're going through. Don't just say, oh, of course you should be, or yes, of course I can see you being a priest. So not necessarily patronizing towards them, but very supportive of the search that they're on.
Yeah, it's a great question. I remember speaking at a seminary in Florida, and I gave the talk to the seminarians, and I asked at the end. I said, "Hey, I'm just curious." I said, "How many of you, your parents were excited, enthusiastic about you becoming a priest?" And not many raised their hands. I said, "What?" I said, "Well, why weren't your parents supportive?" And they said, actually, they were the ones who were some of the biggest detractors from me coming to the seminary were my parents. And I said, wait a minute, it should be just the opposite. They should be ones that should be encouraging you, and doing everything to help foster and nurture if they believe God has a vocation for you as a priest. And they were saying, well, and a number of them say, well, my parents weren't grandkids.
Yeah.
And just a little side note, if they would have had more kids, then this wouldn't be an issue, right?
Hmm.
You know,
Yep.
but we Catholics have bought into this contraceptive mentality of the culture. We try to limit our family size, and this is what happens. We don't have enough kids, and all you're thinking about is the generation and the continuation of your family line. You know, the solution that have more kids. But anyway, that's a side note. But yes, but the support network I think is very important. So for me, my support network number one is my mom and my siblings. Again, when I was in high school, they made fun of me, but when they saw, you know, my path and my journey and how serious I was about this vocation, they were very, very supportive. My close friend, my closest friends, the ones who really know me, who aren't interested in getting something from me or just, you know, leveraging a friendship for their own purposes and their own needs, but really care about me as a person and are really, really good friends. They were all very supportive. And so that kind of for me outweighed my father's extreme disappointment
Sure.
and anger, quite frankly, with my decision. That of course, as a person, he's not a person of faith. He couldn't understand, you know, as he said, why would I want to live with a bunch of men? You know, so it didn't make sense to him. But that support network, even if they don't understand what God may be calling you to, but if they're there to support you, um, and that's been important to me as I continue to discern my left monastic life, and which we're going to talk about. But that network actually played even more a more important role later on in my discernment
Sure.
process.
Absolutely. Before we jump away from your period in the monastery, you mentioned before about prayer and knowing that this is what God wants for me. This is my calling. And can you explain a little bit about what that prayer was? Like, how do you pray for discernment that this is the path, and then how do you know it when you see it, and then even when it wasn't what you thought it was going to be, the role that it plays in the journey? Obviously you're meant to be there for a reason, so what does the prayer look like? How do you pray? And then what are the signs you're looking for to know that you're on the right track as you go through this phase?
Yeah. So for me, um, uh, when it started when I was 9 or 10, and it was a pull or a tug,
Sure.
you know, an attraction, you know, to the liturgy first, and then that desire when I got to the monastery and I saw how the monks lived, it deepened. So it went from being a curiosity, it went from being something I could see myself doing. It went to now I could see myself living that way. You see, it started to evolve, and then I was very attracted to the silence, to the rhythm of monastic life. I wasn't attracted to getting up early in the morning, but I was attracted to the prayer life, you know, and just the focus on the Benedictine balance of ora et labora, prayer and work. That wonderful balance there. Um, it was just I just felt like this is where God needed me to be. And even when I was at uni and I dated, you know, I went to dances and I dated and things like that, but that desire never left. You know, it never went away. And I was still active in I never stopped going to church. The uni that I went to was a Catholic university, so they had mass in the dorms in the dormitories every week, and I went and in fact I played guitar at mass back then, sang in the gospel choir, and so I was still very much involved in my faith. And so that year that I took um to just kind of live because I didn't want to go in. I wasn't afraid of joining the monastery after I finished uni, but it was more I didn't want to go in with any regrets. I didn't want to go in thinking, wow, I don't know what it's like to pay bills, or you know, so I just wanted to get that kind of young adult experience.
Yeah.
And even then I still had a spiritual director who was a priest, a local priest at the uni. I was still talking and working things through, and still, of course, in touch with the monks. And when I joined, I really felt at home. You know, I really felt this is where God needs me to be, and it was Mark. It was where God needed me to be then. right?
Oh, yeah.
Because after I left, and I'm saying to myself, why? I mean, I remember being 9 and 10 years old, feeling this attraction. First priesthood, then monastic life. Now I'm a monk. Why leave? Why would God put me there and then just to have me leave? But then I realized again, with time comes retrospect, right? You're able to look back, and now it makes complete sense why I needed to be there in the monastery at that time.
Yeah.
Obviously, the monks were disappointed when I left, and I left because I didn't. It wasn't that I feel I wasn't called. My mother got sick and almost died, and when my dad left, I helped my mom take care of the family. So the abbot gave me several months out of the monastery to take care of my sister who was still in high school and to pay bills and kind of manage the house and help nurse my mom back to health before she until she was able to get back on her feet again. And it was during that time out of the monastery that I attended a wedding and then met the woman who ended up being my wife. So, and actually after I met her, I went back to the monastery, because I never intended to leave, and this was a little nice interaction with this beautiful young lady, but I'm going back. And I went back to the monastery, but they wouldn't allow me to come back because my mom was not fully convalesced. Her illness lingered longer than anticipated. In fact, it was the start of a 20-year decline in her health that would eventually take her life, but during that early stage, when the abbot said stay out longer because you can't be halfway in the monastery and halfway at home. And so, I'm going to be out longer. I might as well go on just go, because she kept calling me to go on a date. So I went, and then I went again, then I went again. and so I said, I better not go back to the monastery till I figure out what's going on. What is this all about?
This is all very different all of a sudden.
This is all very different, and then as the relationship progressed and got more serious, I almost went back to the monastery again, Mark, because I never, first of all, I never envisioned getting married, but mostly because I was scared.
I was going to say, what part of that was fear and just thinking, well, that's not what I planned, so let's run from that. Yeah.
It was fear because, I did not want to end up like my parents.
Okay,
well, I was afraid. I did not want to end up like my parents because I knew what was going on with my dad, and I knew that I wasn't going to be like him. Mm-hmm. But still, there's that when you're a kid and you're going through, the parents go through divorce, there's that thing there that you might catch it, Sure. So I was afraid, and I thought, well, what's the safe thing to do when you're scared? You go back to what you know. So yes. I was thinking maybe I should go back to the monastery. So I actually took time in another monastery to discern whether I should go back and be a monk again, or whether I should continue this relationship and get married. And it was there in this other monastery. Again, I didn't go there to join. I went there to discern. That's when I really spent a ton of time in adoration. A lot of time writing. I was kept a little log, a little journal, which I think I still have. Oh, wow. I might turn that into a book or something later on.
Yeah,
I have to think about that. Just kind of what my thoughts were during that time. Kind of what I was feeling. And I thought I would go back to the monastery, but it became clear after several months that no, although there were things I was going to miss about monastic life, and quite frankly, there are still things I still miss about monastic life. That's not where God needed me. He needed me there at that time. Yes, but now that was just kind of phase one, if you will. Now he needed me to enter into this marriage. And so I went to the monastery thinking I was going to go back to the monastery, back to the Newark in New Jersey. But I left confident that I'm supposed to be married. And so, that's what happened. We got married, and she finished graduate school, and we moved to Oregon. And then that started phase 3. So there was the discernment phase for the monastery, the discernment for marriage, and now the third discernment for the diaconate. And that's 3 or 4. There's 4 big ones. Okay. And the diaconate was number 3. Yeah.
Before we get into this third phase, I think what you've described so far is a good demonstration of what St. Paul, I think, tells us to test everything. And that is that you had these pulls in your life. And even though you felt so convicted that that was the one for you, it didn't stop you from experiencing other things before committing to that one. You were committed to it, but you did other things and you tested it, and it worked itself out because of your willingness to be open to testing and to be open to weighing up your options. And obviously, before being committed to them, you can't. Once you've made your commitment, you can't backtrack on that. But you were open to weighing up your options, and it reminds me of an experience I had myself, and that was when I was in a job and I was finding I was getting really bitter with the politics of the job and just the stress of that. And I was coming home at night and just unloading on the family very unfairly, but that's just where I was at. And I decided with my wife that this isn't where I need to be. It's better to be unemployed than it is to be coming home bitter and doing this. And so with child number 3 at the time on the way, I left that job and I was actually unemployed for 7 months, which is stressful when you've got a baby on the way. And you've already got 2 there with you because they were also very young. And at that point, I sought out a Dominican sister who was down here. And I'll never forget the advice she gave me, because I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. I don't know what path I'm on. And she said, you can be rest assured you're on a path. Now look back in your life and see the different landmarks throughout your life and see what part God played in that. And that just like it's turning on a light. I did that and I could see, oh yeah, he led me there. He led me through that. He led me there. He led me to meet my wife. He led us down this path. So why would I doubt now that he's leading us? He's obviously leading us. So just be open. Keep doing what I can do to find the next stage, but live the stage that I'm at now. And that to me was just the most powerful advice, because I was at a really bad place and it changed everything in an instant. That don't forget, this is a journey. I'm not there yet. I'm still on the journey to heaven and I'm not there yet. So I found that really useful.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And, what I realized now is when I look back, I say, well, that time in the monastery was absolutely critical, because now, as a professional speaker and author, traveling literally all around the world, I draw from that monastic experience all the time.
Yes.
I draw from, like, for example, I love praying the office, the liturgy of the hours, which I have to do as a deacon. But God knew I was going to be a deacon way before I even knew what a deacon was.
Yes.
So he gave me that desire for praying the liturgy of the hours and that desire for silence. Because, Mark, you've seen, the kind of reaction people have to what I'm doing. And, you can get an ego from something like that. Or when people want autographs and pictures with you all the time. And I am very uncomfortable with that. That's probably the thing I enjoy least about what I do, is that part of it.
Yeah.
And so I crave silence. No matter what parish I go to, I always go to the adoration chapel. I always spend time, and all of that was fostered in monastic life. My love for prayer and the joy of the faith, and that's a wellspring of intimacy with God that was fostered in monastic life that I just pull from, and I just reap the wonderful harvest that God planted in my heart when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
So I'm reaping, it's like that Psalm, you go out full of tears, carrying seed for the sowing. You come back with a song, carrying the sheaves, reaping the rewards of what God planted in your heart. And there's people along the way who kind of give that water, and kind of water that along those seeds along the way. And so that God helps that seed to grow. But those people, like the sister that you spoke with, and other people in my life played that important role. Even Paul talks about this, right? He says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the yield. And that's basically the life of discernment. The hardest part is the trust piece. When you're going, because it's like a book, right? God is the author. He wrote the whole book. He knows the beginning, the middle, and the end. You only live one page at a time. You know what came before, but you don't know what's coming next. And that's the part of the discernment. Is the hardest part, I think, is the trusting. you're in that moment, you're not sure, you think you're doing what God wants you to do, you're responding faithfully to what you truly believe that God is calling you to do. And I think God will honor that, even if it's not what he wants. He's going to use that time as a lesson that you needed then for something he has for you planned later
I
in
actually
your
love
life.
that analogy of the book, because if you look at it like pages in a book, your past experiences in your life aren't a page that, all right, you've read that one, never to be seen again. That page is what helps you to make sense of what's to come. Because if you just start at page 180, not reading the 179 pages before, page 180 doesn't make sense. So
Right.
everything in every page before leads up to this point and will lead beyond this point into the future. So yeah, it's sure, it's a page in history, but it's a page that has led up to present and will also help you to discern and to navigate future. So yeah, I like that analogy of the book. Let's move
Yeah.
on then to now. Okay, so now you've left the monastery, you've now met the woman of your dreams, you're married. Where did this diaconate fit into this picture? When did you start feeling the call to something more? And marriage is your vocation. So is the diaconate a different vocation, an additional vocation? Like how does that dynamic play out when you've now discerned that marriage is your vocation, and we tend to be given that label and that's it, I'm there. How does the diaconate fit into that, and where did that start for you?
So we live in the state of Oregon, which is on the west coast of the United States, and I grew up in New Jersey, which is the complete opposite. East. It'd be like, like I grew up in Sydney, but now I live in Perth. that kind of thing. One end of the country to the other. And so that's where my wife is from. And so when we got married, we got to the parish, and I still, even after getting married, I still felt that pull, that attraction. Obviously, now it wasn't toward priesthood and monastic, but there was still something there. So I figured, okay, well, God wants me to be involved in the parish. So I was on parish council. I was on the finance council. I was the accountant for our St. Vincent de Paul conference that helped give food assistance, clothing, and utility assistance, electricity, gas, water for people who were struggling to pay their bills. Um, I was lecturing. I was serving and then teaching altar servers. I mean, I just got involved heavily in the life of the parish. Um, and then during the Easter Vigil, our first Easter Vigil in Oregon, in the new state that we're living in now, during Mass, something strange happened. And it has never happened to me before, and it's never happened to me since. But during the Gloria, so during the Easter Vigil, you got you're holding your candles, all the readings, and then the Gloria, right after, before the epistle reading, the Gloria, I mean, the Gloria comes, and so the lights came on, the bells are ringing, and I heard an audible voice say, "Deacon." Now I thought Deacon was the name of someone in the parish. So I turned around, and there was nobody behind us. And I looked at my wife as she was singing. I'm like, she didn't hear that? And so I'm a little confused now because I don't know where the voice came from. But I clearly heard Deacon. And so I went, and so I kept thinking about it during the rest of the Easter Vigil. And I went to Father Nicholas after Mass. I said, "Father, who's Deacon?" I didn't say, "Who is a deacon?" I said, "Who's Deacon?" thinking it was a name of somebody. He goes, and he looked at me. "Oh, you'd be a great deacon." And I said, "Whoa, wait. What are you talking about right now?" Because the deacons that I knew were the men in the monastery who were going to become priests.
Yeah,
I never knew a
transitional deacon.
permanent deacon. Yeah,
Yeah.
I never knew a permanent deacon. I didn't even know what they were. So Father Nicholas is from Tanzania. He has at that time, he had a very heavy accent. He kept saying permanent deacon, but I couldn't discern I couldn't discern he was saying permanent deacon because I never heard that term. And so he said, "Look, he wait here." So he went in the sacristy, and he got a copy. He had a copy of the Second Vatican Council documents, and he turned to Lumen Gentium. I think it was paragraph 29, and he said, "Read this." at the lower end of the hierarchy is the deacon, and it described the role and ministry of the diaconate, and I just went, "Oh my goodness, that's what I'm supposed to do." It was just like that.
It
I
hits
mean,
you
I
that
read
clearly.
that and I was like, "Oh wow, that." I mean, it felt, and the feeling I had was like calm, like peace, like like if you're out at the beach and the wave hits you and the wave just carries you out and you let yourself be carried out by the wave. That's what it felt like. I felt like this is it. This is what God wants me to do. And I got so excited. And I'm like, this is great. And I was 30 years old. So, so I called the diocese was closed on Easter Monday. I called Easter Tuesday, said, "Hello, Archdiocese of Portland." I said, "Yes, I'm supposed to be a deacon." They said, "Okay, what's your name?" I was so excited. And so I ended up applying and I was accepted into the program, but there was no class that year. So I had to wait until the next year for the next class of men to the discernment to start. And so it was a 5-year process. In our diocese, we have to get master's degrees in theology, which I did at the University of Dallas. And at that time, Janet Smith, Marcelino D'Ambrosio, Father Mitch Pacwa,
Mhm.
Ed Peters for canon law, they were all teaching there at that time. So we had these rock star theologians teaching us, and I was like, "Man, this is great." I mean, I was loving the whole experience. And then I was ordained November 23rd, 2002. So, and that was the third phase. So now I'm thinking I'm done. I'm done because I discern, God said they want me to be a monk. Okay. So now I'm married. I know God wanted me to do that. And then I still had this thing and diaconate. Okay, God led me there. Fine. Now I'm married. Now I'm a deacon. Yay. And I'm working in law enforcement, right? So I'm working in the United States. We have police departments on our unis because unlike Australia, where most of the uni students live at home and commute, it's just the opposite. The vast majority live on campus, live away from home in that campus environment. And so many of the schools have their own health center for medical issues. They have their own vocations. I mean, they have all kinds of different things. And I ran the police services on the campus. And so I was doing that and serving as a deacon in the parish. And I thought, this is it. I'm doing what God wants me to do. Just lock it down and just do this for the rest of my life. Not knowing that was part 3 of 4.
Yeah, there's a big leap. There's a big leap of faith still to come.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
All right. So, just before we move on to this next stage, phase 4, the diaconate itself, was there any concern on the part of your wife as to taking on something like that? Because I think you had children at the time, didn't you?
Yeah, when I started the program, we had no children.
Okay.
And then during the program, during the 5 years, we had 2 children, and actually, we had she was pregnant with the twins. We had the 2 children
Yes.
and pregnant with the twins right near ordination.
Okay.
And so, in fact, the twins were born 2 weeks after I was ordained.
Wow.
So we have very, very young children. So during the discernment process, one of the things that the archdiocese did, which my wife very, very much appreciated, was they at one point they brought in the wives of the current deacons, the
Okay.
guys who are already ordained, and so they went off separately to their own separate part of the facility, and they just had a honest conversation. Okay, tell us what this is really going to be like when our husbands are ordained. What kind of stress is that going to be on the family? What about kids? Do I have to sit at church at mass by myself for the rest of my life? Am I gonna have to manage these kids by myself? He's gonna take so much time away at the parish, it's gonna cause a strain in our marriage. I mean, they just honest, open,
Oh, absolutely.
straight up questions. Yeah. And that I think really helped her and cemented in her mind that it was going to be okay.
Okay, great. So phase 4, another big phase. You touched on it. You had a successful career now. you had the diaconate, you were married, you had kids. Something big changes. Can you go through this next big leap of faith? And this is actually where Parousia comes on the scene a little bit as well. This is the phase you had just gotten through when you first crossed paths with Shabel Reish at our end. So can you go through this next phase for us?
So what happened was, because after I was ordained, remember Father Mitch Pacwa was my scripture professor. He was not full-time at EWTN yet. So after ordination, Father Mitch moved on. He went off to EWTN and stuff. And so, and I was not giving talks on the faith at all. I was not doing anything on the faith except preaching and doing my diaconal ministry in the parish and in the hospital. And I went to prisons as well. You know, I was just doing the normal stuff. And then a classmate of mine from graduate school asked me to give a talk at a parish because I had written a paper in graduate school on male spirituality. And he goes, that's something we don't hear a whole lot about. You should, why don't you come to the parish to give a talk? Okay. So the pastor said, fine. I went down there and I gave a talk. I basically read my paper from graduate school because I wasn't giving out talks on the faith yet. And so the pastor liked what he heard. He invited me to come back and give a talk on marriage. I'm like, oh, I wrote a paper on marriage too, but I probably shouldn't read it this time. I probably should, and so that's when it started. And so at that second talk that I gave, someone from the Catholic radio station was there and they invited me to be on the radio. And I don't know anything about Catholic media or Catholic radio or anything like that. They said, no, come on, it'll be fun. So I went and I met with the people at the station. I end up doing this little 30-minute pre-tape show called Faith and Life. Like, how do you live your faith and incorporate that into your life every day? And so Jerry Usher, who used to be the host of Catholic Answers Live at that time, he came to the station to help them raise money. He heard my little show and Jerry invited me to be on Catholic Answers Live. That was the first time I was ever on. And I said, I can't be on a show like that. I'm nobody. I mean, they got all famous people on. He goes, no, talk about the male spirituality. We don't hear enough about that. I said, okay. So I did that. So I didn't know how it all worked, right? I didn't know that my little radio station was also, broadcast EWTN, like Catholic Answers was all part of that. So Father Mitch hears me on Jerry's show on Catholic Answers Live. Then he contacted me. He said, how come you're on Jerry's show and you're not on my show? I said, I don't know, Father. And so he invited me to be on Catholic Answers Live. To be on EWTN Live. So,
yes.
So I'd never been to EWTN before, never met Mother. Nothing. I thought, great, okay, I'll go, I'll do this. I get to see Father Mitch again. I get to see the network. This is great. I go there, I do the live show, and I don't even I leave there thinking that was a wonderful experience. Okay, time to get back to my life. But there were so many emails in response to what I was taught. From all over the world. And I was like, what did I say? Like, what is this? I did not anticipate that kind of response. So about a week after that, I get a phone call from Doug Keck, who was at that time executive vice president of programming on EWTN. He says, man, we're getting tremendous response to what you did with Father Mitch. Do you think you turn that into 13 episodes? I said, I think so. So I ended up writing a script. I sent it in. They loved it. They said, okay, come down and film. I'm like, come down and film. So it just happened. And then the one series led to another series. And then I started getting speaking engagement invitations. And then I got the first international one in Singapore, again, because the wife was my husband's trying to put together this conference. We're looking for international speakers. The wife has a really good friend in Philippines. Philippines watches EWTN. Hey, I just saw this guy on EWTN. Maybe, he'd be good for your conference. And so she told her friend, the friend told her husband, the husband contacted me. And that was the first time, my very first overseas trip was to Singapore. Wow. And then I went to South Africa. And then, so now fast forward to 2000, this was all 2005, 2006, 2007, 2011. I was in adoration, and God said, because I was an anti-terrorism expert, so I would do what's called threat assessments, and I was in adoration, and God said, I need you to do a different type of threat assessment for souls. And I'm thinking about, no, it wasn't a voice, it was like an interior just interior thought, interior locution.
Sure.
And I thought, where did that come from? Because I had no intention of leaving my job, no intention of changing anything, because I kind of was in cruise control, right? I was very comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when God needs you as you're discerning, and God's calling you to do something more or greater with your life or different, he has to make you uncomfortable. So I
Yes.
got very uncomfortable. And I was saying, well, no, Lord, I'm very happy. He goes, well, yes. And I was like, no. He was like, yes. So I kind of ignored it. And then other things started happening. My boss, who was also a parishioner in my parish, who allowed me to go to EWTN and do a conference here and there, and he would flex my time at work. He had a stroke and he had to retire early. And the university brought in another guy, and we didn't get along at all.
Not so
And I
accommodating.
said, uh-oh. So now I thought even more about, maybe God is calling me to leave. And maybe this is the beginning of a sign that God is, developing an exit strategy for me.
Sure.
And so I kept this saying, but my wife was not on board at all. When I first brought up the idea, she goes, you're not leaving your job. You know how much money you make? We have kids in Catholic school. We have a mortgage. What are you thinking? And I said, well, hon, I'm not saying I'm going to leave the job. I just did figure out what God wants me to do. She said, what God wants you to do is keep your job. Right? So it took a year of discernment, because my heart was saying, wow, what it would be like to just give everything totally over to God and just dedicate the rest of your life honoring God by speaking. And my head was saying, you have a mortgage, you have responsibilities, you can't make money talking about Jesus. So it started a year-long, very serious discernment process. And that's when I had friends, again, spiritual direction, but also good friends of mine, guys in my wedding this time, guys who know me and will tell me the truth and not just what I want to hear. And I asked each one of them independently of the other about what I think God was calling me to do. And every single one of them said, yes, we really believe that God is calling you to do this. And I was like, so every door I tried to shut, God would open another one. And it wasn't until, some other situations happened where God made it very, very clear that he wanted me to leave. And I still couldn't do it because I was scared. And I sat down with my wife again. This was a year later, sat down with her. We talked for 2.5 hours. Like literally, we talked about everything. If I left my job, what does that mean? If I stay, what does that mean? What's going to happen with the kids? Like what happens with us financially? I mean, we talked about everything. And at the end of the 2.5 hours, my wife said to me, you know what? God is calling you to do this. And after all, God's in charge of finances. We should do it. And and right then, Mark, when she said we should do it, I had that same feeling that when I read that paragraph in Lumen Gentium about the deacon, that same feeling of peace, that same feeling of calm, that same feeling of confidence. That's the exact same feeling I had at that moment, because I knew no matter what happened to us from that point forward, she would love me and she would stand by me. She would support me, that we were in this together. And so it was her love that gave me the courage to follow God's will.
That's
And so
fantastic.
I wrote a resignation letter, send it in, and June 30 June 2012, I walked away from my career and started speaking and writing full time. And that's when I got the invitation, not from Charbel,
Yes.
but from Renato
Yes.
in Perth to
Yes.
come and do some speaking for educators, for teachers in the Archdiocese of Perth. And when Charbel heard that I was coming to Perth, he contacted me. I didn't know who Charbel was, but he goes, well, since you're coming to the West Coast, can you come to the East Coast and do this. I said, well, I'm thinking to myself, this is what I do now. This is my job. Sure, I'll be there, you know. And that's when I got to know Charbel. And back then, Parousia was in his living room.
Yes.
There was I remember this like it was yesterday, Mark. There was a desk and a computer.
Yep.
And then he had all the stock in his living room on shelves.
Yes.
And that was Parousia Media.
That was.
And I'm looking around going, okay, you know, let's see. But when I got to know Charbel and I heard his vision and I heard his passion and I got to know him as a person, I saw he was a true man of prayer. I was like, this dude totally gets it.
Yep.
And I said, and I knew right then after that first meeting that Charbel and I were going to be working together. I just knew it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and discerning my relationship with him, we put some deals together. So now, you know, because Parousia is the exclusive manufacturer of all of my products, right? So back then it was CDs and DVDs. Now we're going to the USBs and you know, and it's just started a beautiful professional business relationship, but also a wonderful friendship as well.
It's been fantastic. And there was no way his living room was ever going to be big enough.
That's right. But now look at Parousia now. I look back at 2012 and I look now 10 years later. I'm like, oh, come on, man. What?
Yeah.
How God has blessed the work of Parousia and bringing guys on like you and Matthew and so many others that are just on fire for the faith, but also helping people to fall more deeply in love with Jesus as they learn about their faith. You know, it's just remarkable.
Yeah, there's no doubt we feel blessed in the work that we're doing and sort of being led to your path and crossing paths and collaborating for so long now that the Lord's hand is in this, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. So, and that last aspect of your story there, the discerning, the career move, it just goes to show again, like we talked about before, the power of a strong support network. This is something that you had said no to. You were fighting it. Your support network is what going to all these different people that you trusted individually and then having them set you straight, if you like, say, no, you got this wrong. God's calling you to this. And then having that conversation with your ultimate support here in this world, in your wife, and just thrashing it out and saying, this is what we need to do. It just goes to show the power of the support network when it comes to discerning a path in our lives. Look, this has been fantastic, Deacon Harold. Thank you so much.
One more piece I want to add here.
Absolutely.
You know, the hardest part of this is actually making the leap to do it. It's like you understand, okay, like when you fly, oh, the plane looks safe. You know, it's several hundred tons of metal, you know, and I'm going to put my body in this machine that's going to be, 10 kilometers in the air, traveling 700 kilometers per hour. And, you know, that's one thing to think about it. And okay, it's another thing to actually step on the plane, right? To trust enough to step on the plane.
Absolutely.
And it's just like, it's one thing to think about what God wants to do, what you believe God is doing. It's another thing to actually do it. And I think a lot of people never fulfill the vocation God had for them because of fear.
Yes.
Because of fear. And people keep asking, that's the one thing I get more than anything else when they hear my story. How did you make the decision to actually walk away from your job? Because that is scary. Mm-hmm. But I had a plan, right? Because I didn't just say, I'm going to leave and all of a sudden God's going to, no, I had an exit strategy. You know, I was working with people already. I had a publicist. I had my very first event coordinator was a remarkable woman out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who I'd done some conferences for, and she had done this professionally. So she helped me. And so I was already building a team. I already had a plan and a way of, okay, how are we going to make this work? So it wasn't just willy-nilly.
Yeah.
I mean, God gives you the abilities. And because again, economics and business major, thinking I was going to use those skills in a monastery, now I use them to run my apostolates.
Sure.
You know, so God gives you what you need. You just have to help work with him and discern. And again, true love casts out all fear. So we have to learn how to love more than be afraid.
Absolutely. Now, you said it was 2012. You finally handed in your resignation, right? That wasn't that the year the church decreed as the year of faith?
Year of faith. I took a leap of faith during the year of faith. That's
Absolutely.
Right.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Deacon. This has been fantastic. I really believe in the power of stories. and people sharing their stories. Anytime I interview a priest, I love asking them, first of all, why did you become a priest? What is it that drew you to this? And there's such power in hearing other people's experiences that whoever might be listening to or watching this, there might be something that just clicks for them. And, oh, somebody else has gone through that too. That sounds like me. And it can really just help someone along their own journey. So thank you for opening up and sharing your story about your own vocational journey so far. And I say so far because you're still here with us. You don't know if there aren't going to be more leaps of faith in the days ahead. So the journey's not done until we finally reach home in heaven. But thank you for sharing your journey so far. And I hope that the listeners have taken something away from this that's very valuable for them in their own journeys as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Great to be here.
And for anyone who does want to hear more from Deacon Harold, I've said in a few of the previous podcasts, we have this device. It's a USB device that Deacon just touched on it a minute ago. I think there's 21 or 22 audio presentations, and Deacon presenting on various different topics of the faith and living the faith and spirituality. And they're all on one device. It's available now through Deacon Harold's website at deaconharold.com, and then click on the store page. You can also get that through the Parousia website at parousiamedia.com, and once again, clicking on the store page, and just type into the search Deacon Harold USB, and you'll find that device there. It's a really valuable resource. I know that a lot of people struggle to find ways to play an old CD, that format seems to be slowing a little bit. But if you don't have a CD player, you still want to hear this fantastic content, you can first of all purchase and download MP3s. But if you did want it all on one physical device, this USB is a great option. It's proving very popular. I know for you, Deacon, on the road at your events, they very quickly move off the tables. So definitely get your hands on one of those and learn from Deacon Harold. As you can see, there's so much wisdom he has to share. So definitely look out for that on either website. And once again, keep up with Deacon Harold's work and what he's doing at his website, deaconharold.com, and everything that we're doing here in Parousia at parousiamedia.com. Thank you once again for joining us here on Speakin with Deacon today. We look forward to having you here with us next time. So until then, God bless you.